Robert O'Hannison. He has written a fascinating little ditty called Possum Belly Queen. And it's fun. I did read it. It's fun. I read it. Yeah. Actually, I had a very good time with it. Robert's first book was launched in Las Vegas of this year. And Possum Belly Queen is set on a carnival midway in Virginia, where Andy Zartanian spirals into the carnie culture and collides with a syndicate of human traffickers. See, that's kind of fast. With over 20 years in the amusement business, selling rides to carnivals and parks worldwide, he writes what he knows: the amusement business and his Armenian heritage. He and his wife Carol wrote Bloody Soil, a historical fiction piece that captures the pain of the Armenian Genocide. Though never published, portions were read on Fresno's NPR station. I believe that was KBPR.
Right.
Capturing tense moments during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Robert wrote Inside the Silos of Doomsday, an article that was published in Military History magazine, and as one of two men responsible for launching megatons of nuclear weapons, he tells what it was like as a young man to serve in that position when the U.S. and Russia were at the brink of a nuclear war. This native Californian was born in San Francisco, later moved to the Santa Clara Valley at a time when the major product was still agriculture and not computer chips. He now resides in Modesto with his wife Carol. Please welcome Robert O'Hannison.
Thank you very much. I guess I'd probably start how this book came about, Possum Belly Queen. We were in San Francisco, my wife and I, with Bonnie Hill and her husband. And we were overlooking the bay having cocktails. And Bonnie turned to me and said to tell her husband what I did for a living. I said, well, at first I worked for a company that we manufactured major rides like Disney, Six Flags, Knott's Berry Farm, those types of rides, the coasters and the log flumes. And then I went to Oregon and I worked for a company that manufactured carnival and park rides. Some of the models were for parks and other models were for carnivals. We also had a finance company. So I would go out and sell rides at times, and other times I would go out and collect money. Those were more interesting times. Usually when you went into a van or a trailer where the money's kept, there's a guy sitting there with stacks of bills on the desk, all bundled, and there's always a firearm right next to it. So when you're trying to intimidate the guy to pay you the money he owes you, he's got a gun and you don't. So that's sort of a disadvantage. Anyway, we were again up there in San Francisco, and after thinking about it, we came back, and my wife and I talked about a project, and I came up with the protagonist, Andy Zartanian, because he had to be Armenian, and his first name was Andreas, and we did some research on names and came up with that. Afterwards, I tried to figure out where the story was going to go. So one place I knew real well to start it, I sort of did a draft, but maybe about 3 pages only, and so there was a lot to fill in. But I started on the Santa Cruz boardwalk because I knew it well. Our company had actually installed a log flume there. I've been there many times. We've been to coasters there and did a bunch of things. So that gave me the place to start. And then the next thing I did is went to Boston in the book. And I lived in New England for 6 years. So that made it easy to write that chapter. And then after that, the book goes down to Virginia Beach, Williamsburg, in that area. And the reason I did that is we actually built a small park there. So I spent probably a good 6 to 8 months commuting from New England to Virginia Beach. So I had most of the idea of where I wanted to go with the book, and I had to come up with some more characters. And there's an actual gentleman out of Florida who was a large carnival owner. He had over 100 tractor trailers, and plus he had all the rides and food concessions and games. He owned all that. He had a helicopter, a yacht, everything. And so he owed us a lot of money, and I ended up going to Kentucky to collect the money. And when I got there, he wasn't there. So I left a message with his manager that night, and I went back to the hotel. About midnight that night, I got a phone call, and he had gotten back and gotten my message. And he threatened me over and over, and threatened to put me in jail because all the police there, they worked the fairgrounds during fair time, and so they're in his pocket. So he said, if I wasn't there at 8 o'clock in the morning, he'd have me in jail. So I was there. Anyway, the bottom line is that that trip turned us into the best of friends. And he actually flew me in his jet range helicopter up to his other unit, and his wife wrote me out $100,000 worth of checks, and they all cleared the bank. So that guy is part of my antagonist here. They're similar, but my antagonist goes beyond what Al did. I try to create characters that you might see on a carnival midway. I try to create characters that blend in on the midway, but take you behind the scenes in the book, because much goes on behind what you see on a carnival midway. And so some of my characters are back there. Like I have Sprocket. He's an old biker, over 60 years old, married to a young girl from Central America. And then the next thing I went to is I used the internet and Google Earth. Though I had been to all these different places, my memory when I was there was totally different than today. So Google Earth really helped me. I could find a location that I was familiar with and see it as it is, today. And each of the spots where I plotted through the book, I actually looked up on Google Earth to make sure I was accurate with my descriptions and stuff as the day, when I was writing it. The carnival industry is obviously different than the park industry. The major parks, all the management wears shirts and ties around the park. I don't care if it's hot or 110 degrees, they're in ties. You go to the carnival midway, they're a little different. Let me read chapter 1 here. Even though Pop loved the carnie life, he used to call it the devil's sandbox. He could never understand why Andy didn't feel the same. Amusement parks turned silent and eerie when the lights were out. Standing among the metal beasts, he got the same wrenching feeling in the pit of his stomach as he did in the Army when he'd been on mission and hit a blind spot. No way out until it was finished. Couldn't discuss it then, couldn't forget it now. He made his way down Santa Cruz Boardwalk, past the Roundup and paratrooper, then headed toward the log flume at a potential 90 Gs that would save his business. Wood groaned above. He stopped and looked up. The giant dipper, steel coasters, didn't make that sound. A maintenance man maneuvered across the top of the structure, a task he did daily. Hit it, the man shouted. The motor whined. Then the chain dogs engaged. A steady mechanical drum of metal against metal grew louder. The test run for the day. The coaster hesitated at the top of the lift, then plunged down the drop and whipped around the first turn. "Would you ever get on that ride?" A clipped, almost British accent startled him from behind. He recognized that $90,000 voice, turned and extended his hand. I've ridden every coaster in the country, but wouldn't step foot on a round ride, Andy said. Stomach can't take it. The man was a couple of inches taller than him, maybe 2, lean and wore tailored threads. This wasn't amusement business attire. Hell, his shoes probably cost more than one of Andy's suits. Mr. Zartanian, I take it, he said, and shook his hand. Stephen Meyer, I'm glad you agreed to meet with me. He tried not to look as weary as he felt. You said the guy wanted to talk about a Mac Himalaya and some other pieces of iron. Iron? Rides. Damn the doom car. He didn't even know the jargon. You must not be in the business. Right, the rides, he said, with a widened grin. I know most of the equipment on the market, Andy said. No one can get you a better deal. That's what I've been told. He tugged on his French cuffs. Unfortunately, the exchange rate has made everything tight with foreign equipment, he said. What type of pieces you looking for? Chance's Aviator is an incredible ride. The Revolution 32 is kicking butt as well. Both have great rider capacity. When the coaster entered the station, a blast of air and screech of metal erupted. Wire glanced around and looked back at him. Brake system, he said. Well, I'm not exactly interested in any rides. Not exactly, he repeated. What the hell's supposed to mean? His body stiffened. I apologize if I misled you in any way, Mr. Zartanian, but the reason for our meeting isn't about purchasing amusement equipment. He should have known the minute he saw him. His head felt like it was about ready to explode. It appeared he'd driven over the hill for nothing, and he didn't like it. Didn't like the phony bastard either. Look, Andy said, I sell rides to parks and carnivals for big ticket money. You're wasting my time if you're not here to purchase a piece. He pulled the pack of Marlboros out of his jacket pocket, tapped out a cigarette, then lit it with Pop's old Zippo. Buyer wrinkled his nose. I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't do that, he said. You've got some pretty big ones getting me out here on pretense of doing business, then asked me not to smoke, Andy said. I don't like being jerked around. His face flushed and his jaw tightened, like a pitcher ready to throw his best fastball. Mr. Zartanian, the reason I'm here is worth considerably more than what you would have made selling me this ride. Keep talking. He took a long drag trying to decide whether he should believe him, his words as sharp as his facial features. Buyer moved around to the other side. Upwind from the smoke. I represent Jonathan Carlisle. You may have heard of him. Not that I recall, and when I'm finished with his cigarette, I'm out of here. Mr. Carlisle is head of Carlisle Precious Metals out of Boston, he said. 5th generation. You want me to be impressed? And he saw 90 grand and his life drifting away like the smoke he exhaled. Yeah, and he's probably personal friends with the Kennedys. If this guy is interested in developing an amusement park somewhere, you've got my attention. If not, we're through talking. I think not. His tone hardened. Mr. Carlisle wants to engage your services to help him find his granddaughter, Emily. He flicked a cigarette butt on the damp boards and snuffed it out with the sole of his topsider. You're kidding, right? Why would I want to do that, he asked. Hell, I wouldn't do it if you paid me $90,000. I would have made selling you the ride. Either you're out of your mind or you have me confused with someone else. Oh, I have the right person, the buyer said. Andy Zartanian, 41, currently living in Los Gatos. Grew up in San Francisco, raised by your Armenian grandmother. He knew who had his attention. Divorced, the daughter Julie, who lives with your ex, Marie, in Virginia Beach. His influencing gaze and steel blue eyes made him as nervous as his personal information he was spewing out. What else did this cocky son of a bitch know? So you've done your homework. Mr. Carlisle is extremely thorough. He paused long enough and let the words sink in. As I said, he wants to find his granddaughter, around the same age as Julie. Hearing him mention his daughter's name hit a raw nerve. He hadn't seen her in months, only talked to her a few times on the telephone because of his festering rage. He reached for a pack again and then felt Buyer's hand clasp onto his wrist. Smoke really bothers me, Mrs. Zartanian. Have all the cigarettes you want once we're done. Andy shook free and said, what have the police or FBI dug up? We haven't called them because she ran away and wasn't kidnapped, he said. Mr. Carlisle doesn't want his granddaughter's picture smeared on the front page of newspapers and tabloids. It's her future he's thinking about. No police or FBI? When and where did she disappear? A week ago in Virginia, the last time her friend saw her, she was with a carnival worker. A carnie? He couldn't help thinking how he'd feel if Julie was missing. He nodded. No one has seen her since. I'm sure you know what those carnival people are like. This guy had a way of pissing him off. Most are honest, hard-working people, blue-collar, he said. It's probably hard for you to believe, but some of them are my closest friends. Boston's a big city. Go find your boss a high-priced PI. I'm talking to you because we need someone with a faster inside track, Byer said. Someone the carnies will talk to. There's a dozen guys out there with the same background, but not all of them spent 8 years in the Army involved which you were and knows the business the way you do. Years I'd like to forget, Andy said. What's the Army got to do with it? This guy didn't have the whole story. Images flooded in like a bad dream. Dismembered women and children lay in pools of blood. Rarely a night passed when he didn't awaken soaked in perspiration. Your records stop at a remote facility deep inside Fort Bragg, he said. That aside, let's forward to present. You recently sold Joey Connor a giant wheel in Giptown. The man paid $1 million for it, right? Close enough. He was no longer shocked at anything he or his minions had dug up on him. Your commission was $100,000, he said, but that's not why I'm here. I've made reservations for you first class on United 172, leaving SFO at 8:45 tomorrow morning. I'll meet you in the red carpet room at 7:15. Mr. Carlisle will provide you with details tomorrow night over dinner. Andy's patience was gone. I'm not interested, he said, and started to leave. Byer grabbed him by the arm. He shook loose. Don't ever do that again. I don't do business with people I can't trust. Find someone else. I have no doubt you'll be on that flight, Byer said. No one is asking you to do this gratis. If my information is accurate, and usually is, you earned just under $150,000 last year. He said it without expression as if he reeled off financial histories of strangers every day. You need more than that to bail yourself out and keep business going. On top of that, your ex-wife is bleeding you dry. No amount of money is enough to satisfy her greed. She'll do the same to the next guy. And then there's the matter of your daughter's education. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. Leave her out of this. Julie's a gifted child. His thin smile seemed to underline the words. Good education can be expensive. You think I don't know that? He shoved his hand into his pockets. You Armenians are a stubborn lot, aren't you? He pulled out an envelope and held it up. This will change your mind. Inside, there's information on a wire transfer being deposited in your account the day after tomorrow. $150,000. You'll receive a matching amount when Mr. Carlisle's granddaughter safely returned. The offer stopped him cold. You telling me this guy Carlisle is willing to pay me $300,000 to find his kid? A runaway? Plus expenses, he said. She's not just any kid. Emily is his life. Do we have a deal? Byer looked at him. Didn't blink. Andy said nothing, walked over the wall, then stared down at the waves lapping onto the sand below. His gaze swung right towards Steamer Lane, waters he'd surfed as a teenager. Turning back, he swallowed hard, then took the envelope, trying to salvage what was left of his self-esteem. He said one last thing. What's that? What happens if I don't find her? We both know that's not going to happen. Byer mused, indifference widened into a grin. Wore a suit and tie and lose those topsiders, he said, and scanned Andy's clothes. Mr. Carlisle is extremely fastidious. And with that, he turned and walked down the midway. Son of a bitch, Andy thought. In spite of what he promised himself, he was back in the game. That's where the book, the next chapter, he stays in California. Then he ends up in Boston, and then it's down in the Virginia, and he finds himself into a cesspool of human traffickers where he ends up. And the book actually goes into Mexico, into Rio Rico. I actually, to get the right information, on the bridge crossing into Mexico, I looked up and there was a hotel there. And I called the hotel, and it took me about 3 people to find somebody who spoke English. And then he was able to give me information on that area and where I was going. And then I actually talked to the lady in charge of the bridge that was the government there. And she was a little brief with me. I mean, she wasn't quite as patient, but you know, she gave me information. So what I'm saying is, if you're writing and you need help, reach out. You've got the internet, but people are really willing to talk to you. At least that's what I found. Any questions or?
How'd you come up with the title?
Wow.
Yeah,
Possum Belly Queen.
Yeah.
You've all seen like Beacon's vans,
Yeah.
you know, moving vans. You know the compartments in the bottom where they store their blankets and their scraps? They lift up, it's under the bed of the trailer. That's called the Possum Belly of a truck. Okay? And the young kids that don't have money and they join the carnival, they don't have a place to sleep. So when the rides are set up, all the railings and the lighting and everything that are stored in those possum bellies are all set up on the ride. And that's an empty compartment. So since they don't have trucks or cars, they throw their sleeping bags in there and they sleep in there. And the girls are called queens, so they're Possum Belly Queens. Any other questions?
So do they find Judy?
Do they what?
Do they find Judy?
Do they find her?
You have to find the book right now.
Here.
Read the book. Huh?
Let's say all stories usually end pretty well. But for Andy, he went way beyond. And
so is there going to be a second Andy?
second Andy.
A third Andy?
This is a trilogy, actually, or a 3-book series. The second book, Helix, is almost completed right now. And it is set in a state-of-the-art amusement park, actually in the Manteca area on that 120 there. I've got a place, an imaginary park called Seven Continents. And Seven Continents is actually the world. It's all the different continents. So everybody in the park, when you go into the park, it'd be like Disney. You go into the different continents. You'd be in Europe and a giant wheel, like in France and stuff. So the different parts, that is Helix. And Helix is on the corkscrew coasters. When you go through the corkscrew coaster and you do that, that's a Helix, and it's a big part of the book. And it also has to do with a nuclear weapon. The third book is set on a state fairgrounds.
What's the name?
Chain Dogs is the third book. And for you that don't know what chain dogs are, you've all heard a coaster go up the lift, and you hear the click, 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 click. That's a chain dog. And it locks into the thing, so the coaster can't roll back down the thing. So each time it moves forward, it's a safety lock. And all the cars on the coaster have these chain dogs that lock into the thing going up the thing.
Lock into the thing going up the thing.
Lock into the track, I'm sorry. It's a guide next to the rail. And chain dogs has to do with a gentleman who's a little mad, a little crazy, and he is out to destroy different rides and attractions throughout the country, amusement rides, and cause. In the first chapter, the first thing that happens is the giant wheel at the Sacramento State Fair. The people are on it, and then all of a sudden it's going around at a normal speed, and then it starts picking up speed, and then the revolutions go to where they're throwing people out of the Ferris wheel, and then it goes from there.
How did you get into the amusement ride? I mean, I don't figure you were like 8 years old going, I think I'm going to be an amusement ride guy when I grow up.
Actually, my dad had worked for the company, and when I was in high school, I was taking drafting, and they needed a part-time draftsman. So after school, I would go there, and they were in Mountain View at the time, close to downtown, and I would do drafting. And then when the summer came and the holidays, they said, well, if you want to work full-time, you can work, but you're going to have to do other things. So I was a driver. I'd go pick parts up, or I'd work in the shop, or I'd do different things. And I stayed with the company until I left and went into service, and then came back, went to school for a while. And then I ended up joining the company again, and then worked through the company as a traffic manager. So anytime we would be shipping large rides, because an amusement ride like the coasters and the log flumes, there might be 10 rail cars to, it takes to get that there. For instance, it's amazing, but the giant wheel at the Sacramento State Fair, I was talking to the fellow because I wasn't aware of it. I says, how many trucks does it take to move this? He says, 17.
Wow.
So the giant wheel at the State Fair takes 17 trucks to. And we ship stuff overseas, so we used to ship on ship. And we also, one thing we did, they wanted a corkscrew coaster like it's at Knott's Berry Farm. I don't know if you've been to Knott's Berry Farm, identical coaster. And they wanted it in Japan, and they wanted it in a hurry. And we chartered 3 747s and put them on all the truck and stuff on pallets and everything. It was strapped down, it went into the 747. At that time, it was $67,000 a plane. And that's in the 70s, early 70s. And we shipped it
Well, I'm comforted to know that there's a business that has worse shipping charges than publishing.
and they get up there pretty high.
Did you want to mention the book first? No?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Next Saturday, there's in Manteca, there's the Big Bass Outlet there, and there are other stores there in the J.C. Penney's, but it's the Big Bass Outlet. And Carol and myself were on the board up there, and they're having a big book festival there, and there'll be about 50 authors that'll be speaking at about 6 different stages. And in the morning, it'd be a parade for kids in costumes. There's going to be a flash mob they have planned that's going to perform. They're going to have Batmobiles going to be there. And throughout the day, there's like 5 or 6 food trucks. Be the food there. And there'll be entertainment throughout the day. Last year, Carol and I stumbled across it, and then we became part of the board this year. And it's very well organized, and it's entertainment for the family, and it's educational. I mean, there'll be authors, there'll be a man there, one of the top in the country, fly fishermen, and he'll be doing demos. Bonnie and Hazel will be there with us.
Chris.
Who else? Chris, he's not here today, but he's been here. Chris has been here, Chris Allen Poe. And so, if you're around or something,
I know.
what?
Also got all the authors are going to have different times speaking and also different workshops too.
And it's free.
And it's free.
Yeah, it's free. So it's just a fun day for everybody to, and the weather's supposed to be nice. That always works on our behalf. Any other questions?
And the reason I said please do promote that, it's not something I want to send people out away
Right.
from our store, but I'm actually looking to do that here in town next year. So it's a really good thing. It really gets some wonderful exposure. I already have 2, maybe 3 TV stations that want to co-sponsor, and as does Kohl's. So it could be, we need to do something to really raise the literary awareness of this area. This is not, it just needs to come up more and more and more. So keep an eye out, and I'll be contacting you to here.
Yeah, it's different than obviously the conferences that we used to do it here and in different places and we used to attend. But the book fair is just, I think it's great for the children because there's like a story time theater. So it'd be reading kids' books and it's just a good family entertainment.
And it makes it more of an event.
Right.
You know, I think the draw last year when we talked about it was like 3,000 to 3,500.
You're expecting
You're
double.
liable to have it at Matty. Of course, there are crossroads between Stockton and San Francisco. They're all right there.
I have
Right
a
there.
map here if you want to see it real quick.
What I'm looking to do here is basically at the Discovery Center, which gives me 10 acres
I have it
to
just
fill off with.
Yeah, this is the layout of the facility up there. There's a big water feature in there. This
Yeah, that's
is a big vast outlet there that you can see from the highway there, and all the stores, and all the authors will be around the, you know, the walkways and stuff that they'll have there. And it's a great event. It's a great family event.
I'm glad
And
you're
it
doing
promotes
it.
literacy.
Yes.
Most of it. Great.
Is that prequel, right?
Anybody have any further questions for?
You had a different weekend than that.
We could have moved to the following weekend.
Why would we do that?
Everybody would go to one and then go to the other.
Oh, I'm going to go to a different town.
Different time of the year.
Good.
Yes.
One less there.
Not only different, we use different seasons. I'm looking to go spring probably. We'll see what we do. So, thank you very much. Wonderful, wonderful authors. Wish the draw could have been a little bit better, but we got some, and that's what it's all about. And we're getting a little bit of exposure from Channel 47. You'd be wanting to get a few interviews, I would assume. So, thanks again, mingle, and you guys are great.